Hi, hello everyone. Good evening, everybody, and welcome you all to this live masterclass session today. And myself, I'm Melina Jean here. Working at Ford. I started my career at Ford, and currently I'm working as GCP security engineer, and I'm into the space. Into the security space for almost 3 years. This is all about myself. So without any further delay, we'll just get into the today's session. Which is all about the continuous compliance and remediation. So yeah. So before we get started, if you have any questions in between the session, you can post it in the chat space, and during the Q&A, we can pick up those questions and we'll get it answered. As I mentioned, today's topic is continuous compliance and remediation, and myself, Melina Jean here. So this is going to be our agenda today, like basically what is continuous compliance and remediation, and what is Chef Tool is all about, and what is Chef InSpec, our Chef Automate, and finally we'll have our Q&A session. So yes, what is continuous compliance and remediation? So what is all about? So and why do we need to get into this continuous compliance and remediation? So basically, before we get started, let me just start with an example. Now we would have noticed this in our organizations. We'll have a lot of rules to be followed or set of instructions that to be followed. So one such good example that we can take is that once in 60 days or 90 days, we'll be prompted to change our password. So this happens with our the desktop or the laptop that we are using. So that is one kind of a check. So we need to keep changing our password every 60 days or every 90 days, whatsoever. It depends on your organization. So here in this space, we are telling, so the password expiry date is going to be 90 days. So when it is going to be close to that 90 days, you will be keep on getting the prompt message asking you to, change the password. So this is what we would have usually seen. The same scenario, you can take it to your server. So you will have a admin, local admin password over there. You will have in, what combination of a set should that password have? So many capital letters, so many small letters, that complexity, the history, the minimum age. Likewise, we have lot in for the password. So this is one such example. So the same way, how are we going to monitor in a server? How are we going to, make sure these checks are in place and they are constantly in place? So this is where our compliance and remediation, and this is not a one-time work, and it has to go on, every day or multiple times in a day, and so on. So that is going to be a continuous compliance and remediation. Okay. So with the same example, let me tell you, we are saying as the password expiry date is going to be 90 days. All right. So since we have taken the example of password, so in the servers, we'll have something called as local security policy. So there where you can find all these, checks for the password in place. That you can find like within how many days you are going to, change the password, or like the password is going to get expired, the minimum age, the maximum age, and all those sort of things. So with this compliance and remediation part, we are going to check whether that 90 days is in place, right? So that the user will be keep on getting the prompt. So when it is close to that 90 days. So this is what this compliance. So if it is in 90 days in place, that's where that's when you can say your server is compliant. So that's how you make sure your server is in compliance state. Okay, so every day you're going to, even if somebody, without knowing or knowingly, if somebody is accidentally making those changes, so your compliance and remediation, the tool that we are going to use, we need to make sure that the desired state is back to, back in place. So this is about the compliance and the remediation part. So I mentioned, right, so when somebody is accidentally changing these values, so apart from the desired part, so how do you get that back in place to the desired state? So that is where your remediation. So whenever there is some deviation from the actual value set, you're remediating it. So this has to happen in an automated way, and it has to happen in a continuous way. And that is what the entire stuff, continuous compliance and remediation, is all about. So what is the process that we are going to do or follow in order to take this place? In order to have these stuffs done. Okay. So here we are going to see a tool called Chef. So with respect to Chef and what is Chef and all those, we'll just see in our upcoming slides. So before that, what is the procedure that we are going to follow? Say we are going to create policies. So policies that is going to maintain our infrastructure security, thereby maintaining our compliance. And if it is not in place, it's going to remediate for us. So in such a way, we are going to create policies. We are going to test our policies before we let them into our production. So this is going to be our first stage. So we are going to create it. We are going to test it before we let them into the production, so that we don't want any of our machines to get corrupted in the production, right? So that is the first step. And your second step is going to be, you're going to target your systems. So what are your devices you're going to target? Is it your on-prem servers? Is it your cloud servers? So all those target devices, you're going to push your policy right into these devices, so that this continuous compliance and remediation process can go on, right? So this is our second step. And the third step, so once after pushing, as admins, we need to get to know, right? So what is the status of the service? So you have say like 10,000, 11,000 servers. You wanted to see their status at the final dashboard level or at the console level. So that reporting part is going to be your third step. So your first step is going to be creating the policy, and you're going to test it in your local before you pushing into your production stuff. And then your second step is going to be, pushing it to your target systems, let it be your on-prem servers or going to be your cloud servers. So that is going to be your second step. And your third step is going to be, making those servers, so to all the systems where you pushed your policy, them to get reported back to a dashboard or a console for you to see and make an analysis. So these are the three steps. So moving to next. So what is Chef? So I mentioned, right? So this continuous compliance and remediation can be achieved in one way. So that is our using our Chef tool. So Chef is basically, it's a powerful automation tool. You can also, call it as configuration management tool. Yes, which is going to help you in transforming your infrastructure into code. Say you have an idea, so and so this is how the infrastructure has to be like. This is how, like, you want to have these checks in place, so that you think that the security will be good. So you're having everything in your control, I mean, with the security wise. All right. So to have all this in place, so that is going to be your idea, you're going to put it into a code. So this to achieve this, to make your infrastructure into a code, your Chef tool is playing a role over here. Okay. So it's entirely, it's going to automate the entire step. So all these steps that we discussed in our previous slide, those the continuous compliance and remediation, you need to automate it without any human intervention, so that they can do their processes and get you the final result, right? So that automation, what are the steps that have been involved? So you're going to build your policies, you're going to deploy them to your target missions, and finally you're going to manage it through a dashboard or a console. As an admin, you're going to look into what is happening with all these servers you're having, right? So these steps are going to be done by our Chef tool on behalf of us. So this is all about the Chef tool. Moving into the next slide. Okay, these are the fundamental stuffs with respect to the Chef. All right. So here we have three different boxes. So one is the Chef TK. So Chef TK is nothing but Chef Development Kit. All right. And the second one is going to be a Chef Server, and the third one is going to be our clients. So Chef DK is nothing but it. You can always relate to the first three steps that we saw in our first slide, right? Since because everything is going to get related to it. Okay. So Chef TK is nothing but your local workstation, right? The development kit that you're going to have it in your local, and you're going to do all the development work in your space, in your local mission, right? So that is called as Chef Development Kit. So basically what this kit is going to contain, right? So all the resources that you would require to develop a policy or as a cookbook, so all these terms we'll be seeing in detail, in the following slides, right? So all these stuffs, so for the building stuff as well as for the testing stuff. So this building and testing together frames your Chef TK. That's your development kit, right? So building, we know we are going to make cookbooks. We are going to create policies so that those will be pushed into our servers. So that is building part. What about the testing part? Testing part is nothing but, you have built these policies. We need an space to test them, right? So how are we going to test them? Not a space, but you wanted to make sure it is all working fine so that it's not going to break anything in your production part, right? So how are we going to test these? So you have inbuilt resources again for these, like you have test kitchen, so you have cook style, so you have inspec, you have chef spec. So likewise, you have a lot of testing tools that comes along with your development kit. So one part, it actually helps you to develop your policies or your cookbooks, and the other part is that it's going to help you test it. Okay, so this is all about your chef development kit. That is Chef TK. Right now, once everything is ready in your local, you have tested it, it's all working fine and perfect. So now we are going to push it to the server. That is your Chef server. So Chef server is nothing but, you can just imagine just like a server where all these, you're going to keep your cookbooks, your policies, everything into it. And this Chef server is in continuous constant contact with your client machines. So client machines is nothing but the end servers or your target machines, the on-prem servers or your cloud servers. So whatever you can keep it. So those are going to be your client, and this Chef server is in constant contact with your client machines, right? So whatever the client performs in the in your target servers, that has been contacted to the Chef server, as well as the configuration files which you created in your local and pushed it to your server is been fetched by the client machines from your server, right? So this is like, you can just imagine like it's an intermediary part where you're developing and pushing it to it. So from your local, you cannot push it to your clients, right? So this is an intermediary part. After developing, you're pushing into the Chef server. So once that is done, the clients are fetching it from there, and the fetched details inside the VM are been reported back to the Chef server, sent back to the Chef server. So it's kind of an intermediary, you can imagine it to be. So this is all about your you know the entire fundamentals of Chef. So you have your development kit, your server, and finally your clients. So moving on to next. So in between, if you have any questions, so please post it in the chat space. So we'll pick it up when we are getting into the Q&A session. Right. Okay. The next slide is all about components of Chef. So what are the it's almost the stuff that we saw in our fundamentals. So a little bit in elaborate. So the Chef server, it's all about it's going to contain store information about how you want it and what are the systems you wanted to manage. So it's going to keep on communicate with your nodes. Your nodes are nothing but the service. So your target machines, your devices, all right. So so this is how you're going to manage your entire application infrastructure. So your development kit is nothing but your workstation, your local. So before deployment, you're going to create it in your local, you're going to test it over here, and then you're going to push it to the servers that are in the production. So that workstation is called as Chef development kit. And your Chef clients or your physical, virtual, or your cloud servers or the missions devices against which you wanted to, like that's your final target. So that is Chef client, right? So next, another new term is our Chef supermarket. So what is this Chef supermarket? So you can just relate it to our daily kitchen household stuffs. You will have the supermarket. You will get your things done there. You will get it everything what all you require. So it's just like you imagine like a community, right? What all you require, the common things, whatever you require, you get it from over there. Then when you have a chef cookbook, book written by a chef. So when you get into that, you will have the recipes and all those stuffs. And then most of the terms that we use will be like knife, kitchen, something like that. Something you can just relate it to your our daily stuffs. Okay, so the same way, whatever I mentioned, Chef supermarket is something like you can just imagine it to be a community where you will have all the common cookbooks. Say for example, you will be writing a cookbook that is as per your organization requirement, right? And you will be pushing that to your target missions. So there are certain cookbooks that is common. So say for example, if you wanted to install Chef Client onto your target missions, that is your client missions, you require a cookbook for that, right? So when you develop a cookbook, this Chef Client cookbook will be a dependency over there. So you won't go and write the Chef Client as well. So that is already available and provided by our Chef tool, right? So these type of common cookbooks, you can always find it in the Chef supermarket. So this is one such example, right? So it's just an very user friendly UI space where you can go and looking for your commonly the cookbooks that you would require for you to develop further cookbooks using that, right? So that is all about the Chef supermarket. And then, so we spoke about cookbook recipes and all those stuffs, right? So in depth about what are those. So what is a cookbook? So if you wanted to, you're creating a policy file and whatever you're doing it. So for the basic is going to be your cookbook. So it's the fundamental unit for your configuration, right? So whatever you wanted to, you're imagining. Say for example, like you're writing a cookbook. You're saying if I'm just roughly giving you an algorithm kind of representation here. So say for example, you're saying if this mission is going to be Windows, I wanted to follow certain steps. If this mission is going to be Ubuntu or something else, I wanted to follow another set of different actions, right? So this is your cookbook. You're giving the instructions, you're doing the configurations based on the OS family in our example, right? So this is where your basic fundamental configuration stuffs you're going to put it into place. Okay. And then, so what does this cookbook basically, basically they contain, right? Okay, so in this cookbook, if you see, we have so many different stuffs that it contains, right? So one thing is that recipes. So what are these recipes? Collection of multiple resources together is a recipe. So again, in a recipe, you will say whatever configurations that you wanted to make in depth. So this you can imagine it to be like a different layers. So all these you see over here comes under a cookbook. You can imagine a cookbook to be in topmost folder. Maybe I can just show you the structure right here. See, your cookbook is going to be the topmost layer or topmost folder, and under that, here if you see, you find the attributes. Then you find the files. Then you find your recipes over here, templates. So these are your components of a cookbook. And that's how your cookbook looks like. So basically what these cookbooks contain, it's going to contain recipes and it's going to contain attributes, right? And files, templates, metadata, all those kind of stuffs. So this is what your cookbook basically contains, and your configurations are going to lie inside your recipes, right? And when your recipes are, basically when you run a cookbook, the recipes part will get your code will get into the recipes part, and it will look for a file called as a default.rb. So rb is nothing but Ruby. The entire recipes and everything that you write here in the chef is all about is with Ruby language, right? So this default.rb will be the first file your program will be looking into when you run a cookbook, right? This will first whatever is present inside this default.rb will be run. If say for example, inside this default.rb, you're calling another cookbook or sorry, another recipe. So then after getting into this default.rb, going through the things, and if it finds any other recipe to be run inside it, then it will traverse to that recipe and it will run that again. So this is how your steps goes on. So this will be a little bit clear when we see how a policy file is written and all those stuffs. So a bit to give you a bit of clarification here. So your cookbook is going to be the topmost, and inside that you're going to have recipes, attributes, files, and everything. All these components that we see here in this previous slide are going to be embedded inside the cookbook, right? So we know now recipes is a collection of resources, right? And attributes. Attributes are nothing but it will have some default settings. Say, let's take it. One such example is that so if your mission is left idle, so the account lockout duration is going to be some 15 seconds or 20 seconds or some 5 minutes, something like that. We'll just keep it. Okay. So if your mission is left idle, so that will be your account lockout duration, right? So say you just think like your organization wanted to minimize that. I don't want it to be 5 minutes. I wanted to even reduce it to some 30 seconds or something, or 2 minutes or something like that. I wanted to reduce. Then you're going to override the default settings. So default setting is going to be 5 minutes, and your organization, according to your organization, you're going to customize it, say, and keep it 2 minutes. So that overriding, so it will contain the default settings, and from there you will pick up the attributes and you will override it, right? So that's where your attributes has a role. Okay. So next is going to be our files. So this files basically will tell you how to distribute the files within a cookbook. Like if you take this entire stuff, you can have multiple cookbooks, say for even 10, 15 cookbooks, and each will contain 20, 25, 30 recipes. So, it's a huge bulk stuff, since because you're going to monitor your entire infrastructure with this, right? Okay, so it will tell you how you wanted to distribute the files to your target missions, right? So that is this about this component. And the next one is your libraries. So this is going to allow the use of like the arbitrary stuff. So you wanted to what to say, like yeah, if you wanted to fetch some information from a common space or from your cloud space, something like that. So somewhere you're going to fetch some details, and then you're going to use it within, so whatever supports Ruby, so or whatever is supported by Ruby, all those stuffs you can do it under this libraries, right? Also you wanted to tie up with your connect with your LDAP, something like that, and all those things you can do it here in the libraries. Then comes your custom resources, are nothing but if you don't have a default resource or in a defined defined resource present in Ruby, then you can go in for your custom resources. You can create your own resource. So what is a resource? It's nothing but a set of actions or set of stuffs that has to be performed. So just like in our program, like how we used to define a function or something like that, right? Inside that you will have a set of steps where you will put it under a function, and you will call it then and there when you require it. So that is all about your custom resources. And then comes your templates. So templates are something like when you wanted to create a static set of files or text file, or something like a configuration file you wanted to create, something like that, you can go in for templates. You can make use of the templates here. So what do these templates, if you see, they will be ending with an extension called as a .erb, that is embedded Ruby. Okay, so that's where your template. So when you have an lot of what to say, lot of configurations you wanted to, and you wanted to handle a very complex configuration stuffs and all those things, you can go in for this templates. And then comes your metadata. Metadata is nothing but it will contain all information about your cookbook. Say for example, what this cookbook is all about, and if you have a name for it, and who is the maintainer, what is the maintainer's email ID, do you have any license, you want to give any short description, long description, all this sort of common information about your cookbook can be placed under this metadata. So these are our various, components or stuffs that we have under a cookbook. So this is about our cookbook. So moving on to the next slide, we saw the structure. So yeah, we know now inside cookbooks we'll have attributes, files, metadata, all the stuff that we saw in the previous thing, right? So moving on to next is our policy files. So policy files are nothing but it's a you can always deal with cookbook as well. And the other optional way, when you wanted to enforce something and do all those things, or you have lot of you wanted to create or handle different set of applications in a different way, or you wanted to handle them in a better way or something like that, it's just an optional way for you to manage your environment, right? And basically it's just a single document. Your policy file is a single document. Okay, and you put in all your dependencies. Say for example, you have multiple cookbooks that you wanted to inherit into the policy file, obviously you can do that, right? You can bring in all your cookbooks and you can put it under this. So, and also if you want to include various other policy files, you can put them under here. So this is how basically your policy file looks like. First you will give a name for your policy file, and then your source. So I told you, right, you can fetch certain cookbooks from the community. That is your supermarket. From there as well, you can fetch it. The other source will be your chef repo, which is your local. So within that, wherever you're creating your cookbooks, even in that space, you can keep your cookbooks, and even from there, you can pick it up. So two ways of doing. So one is from your community directly, you can take it, or you can have it in your own same folder structure, and you can call it from there as well, right? So these two parts are done. And then if you wanted to include various other cookbook as a dependency to this policy file, you can just say this is a cookbook and this is the name, right? And just as a name you can give, or along with the version you can mention, or if it has a different path. Say for example, you have a policy files in a one folder, and in another structure folder you have the cookbook. So you can mention the path as well. So it automatically goes and checks for that path. And the other way, from and different source, like from GitHub, you have to mention all these, details like its branch, and if you have a tag, etc. You can mention all those. And with this, all these integrations, you can also pull in the cookbook. So different ways of calling your cookbook and including them in your policy file, right? And then next comes are, like, if you already created many policy files and you wanted to include them into this, you can do in this way. The structure is the name and the path. So here in this path, what you will mention is that when you're running it, it will produce something called as .log.json. So you have to mention the path of that log.json file that has been generated, and not the policy file that you have created. So when you build it or when you run it, it will generate a log.json file, and that path has to be mentioned over here. So that will be the way the tool understands it. So that JSON file will be the way the tool will understand, and not the regular way that we create it, right? So this is an example. So include policy, and foo is going to be our, the policy file we have created and its path, the log JSON, and run list. So run list is nothing but in which order it has to run the various other cookbooks, right? So I'm saying like my cookbook name is Jenkins, and under that which recipe. So default recipe, I want that to be run as first, right? After completing all the steps that I've provided in this cookbook, in this recipe, then it will come to this again. So this is like your ordering, you're giving the order in which the tool has to run your cookbooks, in which it has to build the order you're giving it. So next is going to be the mount cookbook. Under that, first recipe is going to be a default to be run. Next is networking, that default has to be run. So you're giving your run list over here. So this is one example of overriding a control I mentioned, right? So basically in the attributes under cookbook we saw attributes, right? In that file, if you see, it will be with a keyword here. Instead of override, it will be present with the default. So default means it's a default setting, right? By default, those are the settings for a VM or for your target machine, right? And if you wanted to override that thing, so you will take that, you will put it up the same path, right? And you will mention before that default, you will just mention it as override, and then you will add it and whatever value you wanted to do for that, right? So this default override, by default in the tool, they have a different precedence level. So you can have a doubt over here or a confusion. So how it will identify this has to be an override. So these two keywords has a different precedence level. So the highest precedence is given to the override. More than default, the override has the highest precedence. So this is basically all about your policy file and the structure of the policy file, right? And before we get into the next part of our session, I'll just give you one clarity about what are these terms are about. So these terms are what we are going to see in our following session. So the first one is going to be chef compliance. Obviously, we would have got an idea right now what is chef compliance. It's nothing but monitoring your nodes, means your target systems, whether they are compliant as per the actual standards or not. Checking and making sure they are compliant. So next is your remediation. What if they are not compliant? They are deviated from the desired values. It has to remediate it and revert back that value. So that is called as chef remediation. So these two are the ones that we have been looking into so long. Next comes our Chef InSpec. What is this Chef InSpec? So I mentioned when I was telling you about the testing tools. So Chef InSpec is one of the testing tools. So this is going to perform test onto the nodes, and it will report back the value, the status, right? You will be writing test so that that will get reported. See, you already have the desired, you have mentioned your desired value, and if that is not in place, it has to remediate. These two you have done. So these two are going to run something internally within your target missions, and as an admin or as a, you know, you will never know what is happening within the server. You won't have track of it, right? So even if something goes wrong, only when it is reported to you, you will get to know. So how you will get that reported? That's where your Chef InSpec comes into picture. So you will write some tests so that it will keep on checking and it will keep on report to you, right? And where it is going to get reported, that is our Chef Automate. It's a console, it's a dashboard. So all the tests that is conducted by this Chef InSpec will get reported in this Chef Automate space. So right. So I think now since because like we have lot many terminologies over here, this might give us an idea like what we are going to see further in our session. Next one. So we already saw what is a Chef compliance server. So it's a centralized infrastructure where it's going to, the client is going to come and communicate, and it's going to send you all the configuration files. And basically, this is going to support all sort of OS families, right? And you can manage you're going to manage all your uh, your target systems, and it's going to monitor it continuously. So that's where it's continuously it's checking whether the machines are compliant, and it's remediating if it is not. Okay, so thereby it is accomplishing the organization's security stuff, right? It's making sure it's all up to date, right? So that is a Chef compliance server. What is remediation? So whenever there is a deviation, it's going to remediate it, reverting back to the desired value, and that is Chef remediation. So this is one such example, right? So this is how your server will look like, and here you see lot of checks. Each and everything is a check. Each and everything has been running over here, and whenever there is a deviation here, it is saying so. This is there is a deviation over here, and it is changing it. This green color stuff that you see over here is something. It is reverting back. So something that was not in the desired state, it is reverting back to the desired state, so that you can always find it in green color. And the other example here, if you see something, if you see with this is again with respect to updating some configuration file, you will have so many changes and stuffs. It is doing it and updating it to the desired configuration state, right? So this is how you can find like constantly it has been running on the servers and making sure it is in place. So next, so this is our the next set of topic is starting out, Chef InSpec. So here Chef InSpec is nothing but, I told you, we are going to create something called as profile. So that profile is going to contain all sort of a test. So you're going to add various tests into that profile. Now, how you can relate to this compliance and remediation with the inspect part? Now, they two are different parts. All right. So you will have values, default system values, what are supposed to be overridden, all these stuffs you will have it in your compliance and remediation part. All right. So what happens? All the checks that whatever you have in your compliance and remediation, for all those, you need to have test cases, test written for it in the inspect as well, so that whenever now say for example your one set of scan has been run in your server, so the compliance check has been run by the Chef compliance, and it has found some deviations, and it has been remediated, right? And again some changes has been made. So before the next scan could happen, that will be captured by the tests that you have written in your Chef InSpec, that will capture and report it to you, so you know what's going on with your server, right? So these are two parts, but they have to go in hand. So whatever checks you are writing for in the Chef compliance and remediation, for all those, you need to write test in Chef InSpec as well, so that even if one thing is missing, that will go as unmonitored. When you don't have one test for one of the checks in the compliance, that will go unmonitored. So the other way, if you don't have any compliance or remediation, unnecessary check will be played in the inspect, and you will get unnecessary violations for the stuff that is not even remediated, right? So this has to go hand in hand. All right. And then you will target your system, the same concept, right? So in this Chef InSpec code, to give a bit of intro about it, like it is very easy to read, easy to write, just like how I'll say, okay, check whether this is present or not. This should be present, something like that. How we directly we do say the same way. How does the Chef InSpec would look like, right? And this also has lot of inbuilt resources. You can directly call them, and you can just pull in your value and check whether it is right or not, set right or not, right? So you have lot of inbuilt resources for it. So this is all about your Chef InSpec. And this is one such example of a Chef InSpec control that I mentioned, that test, right? So this is the structure of it. You will give a name for it, control, right? You can get these, you know, this structure, you will get it from the chef as well, the profiles as well, right? And a title for it, and you're describing what this control is all about, right? And what is the impact of it, like the severity of it? Is it like very severe, critical control, or it's a medium one, or it has very low impact? So all those you will be mentioning over here. Then this is your actual code. This 3 lines is your actual code, right? So describe security policy. Security policy in the sense I mentioned an example, right? Local security policy. So you have a predefined resource present in Chef tool, so which is actually called as a security policy. So you're calling that resource, and in that security policy, you have something called as minimum password age. So this term should be equal to 0. This value should be set to 0. That's all. However, how we were talking, how you used to instruct, the same way is your code. This is all about your InSpec code. So you have written one test for a particular check, that is minimum password age. So you are checking this minimum password age should be equal to 0. That's all. Okay, so this is all about your Chef InSpec control. And with respect to the entire structure, if you see, this is how it looks like. Okay, the topmost will be your controls. Under the controls, you will have baseline. That will be where you have all your the updated controls. And if at all for these controls you have any dependencies, those dependencies will be present under the vendor folders, right? Say for example, from the sys is your benchmark standards, right? Center for Internet Security, from where you get all your checks, all your controls, right? So you're pulling in that as a dependency, and then you're extracting all the controls. And if you want to have any deviations or any changes as per your organization from whatever sys is suggesting, then those will fall into this baseline. If you don't have any such thing or any other extra controls apart from whatever sys is saying, you will not have all these. You can just have these stuffs, and you can just call them into these things. And this is something, if you wanted to have any extra additional controls, additional checks that you want to perform, you can have a separate Ruby file. So again, this is everything is written in Ruby, but InSpec code, right? So you will have all those. So when you are creating this as a profile, or when you're vendoring it, that is when you're vendoring your dependencies, you will have a lot of these files that you can find, like inspec.log will be generated. So all these will be generated, and inspec.yaml is something, again, just like how we saw a metadata.rb in a cookbook, right? Those will contain the basic information about the cookbook. The same way here, inspec.yaml will contain the basic information about the InSpec profile that we are writing. Who's the maintainer, license, etc., the name, all those stuffs. And if you have any dependency, those dependencies has to be mentioned over here, using which it will be vendor, right? So this is all about your InSpec. Next, Chef Automate. Like we saw, now InSpec is also doing all the checks. So where it will get reported to? So that will get reported to Chef Automate. So you can find all the number of servers that you have, all the the status of the servers, how many controls have been failed, how many tests have been failed. So all these stuffs you can see it in this dashboard, right? So everything will be reported over here to you. So that's what it's an it has all the visibility. You can maintain all your compliance of the servers, and it's again an open source product of Chef, right? And what you can do with all these, okay, for the about the Chef Automate. So it's going to you're going to build it, you're going to deploy it, and finally you're going to manage it. So all these stuffs are been provided by various tools of tools of the Chef, right? So all these 3 things can be handled, can be performed, configured, everything can be done in one single space with all these different features available with Chef. So now see, this is an example of servers reporting to our Chef Automate, right? See, you will have all these. So how many nodes in total you have? In that, how many have been failed? How many has been passed? If anything has been skipped. So all these kinds of, it's an overview dashboard that you can find it over here. So if you wanted to see, now see, for example, this has been a failed server. So if you wanted to see what has been failed inside this, you have to click on this and you have to get into, or you have to get into the scan results over here. See, after getting into the server, this is how it will look like. So what are the total number of controls? How many are critical in that? How many are major violations? How many are minor? If anything is skipped, how many have been passed? So all these different kind of possibilities. So I mentioned, right, in the inspect code, you will be mentioning the impact. That is all about this critical, major, and minor, and all those things. Right now, we here, if you see, so when you see in your dashboard, you can see a lot of all the, if it is showing up 296, all the 296 controls will be seen over here. See, if you wanted to see how a control would look like, see, if you get into the critical and if it has been failed, this is how it would look like. So all these paras you're seeing over here, right? This is the description that you would be providing in your inspect control while writing the inspect control, right? And below this, if you see, you can find what test case has been failed. What is the actual thing? Say, for example, we'll take our own example, minimum password age. It should be equal to 0 we gave. Maybe it would have been equal to 1. So it is deviating from whatever state that we provided. So that will be mentioned over here. It will be very neat and clear. You can obviously make out what has been failed, what is wrong with the server by looking at the data that is presented in this console. So yes, this is all about our, the various features that we have, and the various, stuff that has been provided by the chef. So all these things we have seen. So maybe a quick summary we can do it. So we just saw what is all about the continuous compliance and remediation part and why it is required and how Chef tool is helping us with that and all the fundamentals and components part we saw, right? And then what is Chef Supermarket? And then when coming into deep, what is a cookbook and what are the various components of cookbook we have, and those we saw. Then a structure of the cookbook. So that contains the components of the cookbook and how to write a policy file and what a policy file basically contains, right? And then the various terminologies, that is the Chef InSpec, compliance, and how would you know uh, a remediation stuff would look like from in a server, right? And then how to write an inspect, an example for it, and then how that is getting reported back to our console, that is our Chef Automate, and how would the stuffs in Chef Automate would look like. So this was all about our today's session, right? All right. So right now we are in our Q&A session. So how we can use Chef compliance, right? So the entire stuff that we have been looking into, how we can use it. So you have, say for example, you're somebody or your organization, you're following the SIS standards, okay, or any such kind of a standard. So basically, when considering the chef, so it has all these SIS standards in it. So those SIS standards you can fetch, and you will have various controls. Close to 400 you will have. So you need to check what all has to be omitted if it is not suiting your organization, and if there are any such that has to be deviated, so that like it supports your organization work, and something that has to be made even more stronger, or some controls, some checks that has to be made little more lenient, all these things from that you can fetch it, and accordingly you can make deviations. So you will make deviations in your Chef compliance and remediation part as well, like you will do the default configurations as well as in your Chef InSpec you will make these changes, so that they go hand in hand, we discussed, right? So that you're not going to miss anything out. So in that way you can do it. And what are the questions? Okay, what's the importance of Chef InSpec in compliance with automation? Right. So Chef InSpec, what it actually does is that, uh, just like you have the compliance part, you have the remediation part. So that is going to happen within the server. As an admin, you will never know. I mean, from outside, you will never know the status of the service, right? And also, in some cases, say for example, you have checks and controls that has been written for services, right? This is in respect to the Windows, right? So in the Windows part, this services, sometimes what happens, so when you're creating services, it will also get have dependencies. It will have some dependencies. So when a dependency, we can take an example of spooler service. So when you add in dependency, and as per this, spooler should not run. So imagine like that, and you have already started it manually, and you have added dependency to it. So what happens? This compliance and remediation part, when it is trying to remediate, it will not be able to enforce that, or it will not be able to remediate it, since because a dependency is there. You can understand it in a way like, yeah, you can understand it in a way when there is a dependency, and when a dependency is also going to get affected, since because when you're remediating this one, it won't be able to enforce that changes, right? So at the time, what will happen if you don't have a Chef InSpec or a Chef Automate where you can see the status of the servers? These errors that is happening inside the server will go, unnoticed. So forever that violation will be present over there, and we will not be able to, recover them. I mean, remediate them. So for these cases, you need to write the Chef InSpec test, so that always, not only for this purpose, always for you to know the status of a server, or anything is going wrong, or something is not happening as per the automation, whatever, you will have a final report. You will have a final dashboard where it is getting reported, so that you will be able to see it, right? So that is the main reason we need to use even Chef InSpec, not only compliance and remediation. So it's just an overall monitoring stuff. You're going to manage the entire set of how many of our servers you have, right? In real time, will we edit the existing cookbook or write new cookbooks? You have to write new cookbooks. So you will have existing cookbooks when, in the sense, when it is a community cookbook. Say for example, one such example we saw, right? If it is a common cookbook, like for your in your client, if you want that client to be reporting to your Chef Automate, in that case, you wanted to have client package that has to be installed inside your server, right? That is your target systems. It has to be installed over there. So for installing that, you require something called as Chef Client. So that also, like in Cookbook, you can get it from your Chef supermarket, and you can install it and you can run it, right? For these kinds of community cookbooks, you will be having it in the supermarket, and you can include them when you're writing cookbooks, and that can be inherited and you can do it. So otherwise, for your organization, when you're doing some customized kind of a cookbook for your requirement, when you're doing, you have to write it from the scratch. So when you're just trying to, generating at the beginning stuff, when you're trying to generate a cookbook, that will give you an, small cookbook, a very basic example, just like how we used to, when we get started with our program, by default we'll have the hello program getting displayed, right? Something like that. So the otherwise, the common cookbooks that will be available in the supermarket. So apart from that, we need to write our own cookbooks. So based on our requirement and all those stuffs. Okay, so what are the features of Chef compliance? So features would include like each and every step, each and every check. Say for example, you're having 400, or based on your organization, you're cutting off many controls and all those steps, and you're having some 300, close to 300 controls. So you're not going to manually ensure these checks. So, and it is never possible when you have a huge number of servers. So in that place, on your behalf, this is going to do it. This is going to perform the test on the servers. This is going to remediate for you, and it's constantly monitoring. So you can fix how frequent this has to run, right? So say for example, 12 hours once, 24 hours once. So that will do. Going beyond that is not that much advisable. So you can have it with this time limit. So they are going to monitor these checks, every 24 hours once. So if anybody has manually changed it or accidentally made some changes, these can be remediated. So that's where your chef compliance and remediation is, these are the basic features of it. It's helping in that way. So, right. Automation. What language we use in Chef? Yes, we use Ruby in that. It's entirely whether it is cookbook for writing cookbooks or the recipes inside that, or even for Chef InSpec, everything is Ruby. For Chef InSpec alone, like you'll have some something called as inspect code. So almost something related to Ruby, but it will be a little more easier since because you have lot of you know uh, built-in resources for this inspect code as well, right? And yes, it's platform independent, right? You can manage any target machines. Your target machines can be Linux based ones or Windows, Mac OS, or it can be on-prem, cloud, whatever. So it's platform independent. Mm, right. Okay. So any other questions we have? I think we have pretty much covered all the questions that has been posted in the comment session. Okay. So other than monitoring, what are the features we have in Chef? So with just considering the cookbooks and recipes, you can use them for a lot of automations. So for building up your infrastructure, say for example, you wanted to what to say, you wanted to build up, bring up some infrastructure tools. So you can build them using your cookbooks and recipes, right? So this is something apart from it's basically an automation tool. So and then automation tool come configuration management tool, right? So that is one thing. And also like you have one other tool that is brought in by the chef is the chef habitat. So for bringing in those builders, the habitat builders and all those things, you can write cookbooks, you can write your recipes. So basically, like when you wanted to manage various flavors or the various OS families, this will be very useful. So you can just mention it very clearly in the cookbooks or recipes that you're writing. So if it is so and so, if it is like Windows family, please follow these set of instructions. And if it is going to be a different Linux family, then please follow this set of instructions. And also, like we saw a lot of other features, resources available where you will have something called as helper stuffs. So that can be defined in general, just like you can just imagine like your function, you can define it somewhere in your structure, and you can call it anywhere. So when you think your set of instructions or your code is going to keep on repeating, you can keep that in one place and you can just call them when you're doing your automation. So this can be done even when you're writing it for your monitoring stuff, that is your compliance and remediation part, as well as for your automation part for building up your infrastructure, tools and softwares for bringing up them. You can always use this cookbooks and recipes as well. That is one thing apart from the monitoring that we can do with Chef. Mm. So do we have any other questions? Okay. So I think, yeah, no more questions. We have covered everything. All right then. So we are almost on time. So thank you everyone for joining this live masterclass session. So regarding the chef compliance and remediation part, I think that would have been really useful for you all. And really thank you for joining here and interacting with me, posting in your questions, and that was really good today. So thanks everyone. Thanks once again for joining.